Brian here for Thumper Fab. Today I'm going to walk you through installing our new rear bumper for your HD11 Defender. For the first step, we're going to go ahead and install our light covers and our slim lights, as it'll be easiest to access this while the bumper is still off the vehicle. Then we'll move on to prepping the vehicle for mounting the bumper. We're going to go ahead and mount our light bar covers to our bumper. We use our small number 8 socket cap screws and lock nuts. You'll simply slide the screw through the light cover and through the bumper. Cap it off with a lock nut on the back side. With your light covers tight, you can go ahead and mount your 6-inch slim lights. You're going to use the hardware and the Allen wrench that's provided in the light box. You'll simply slide the light in between the 2 tabs, start your hardware, and before you tighten it up, you're going to want to point the light in an estimated direction that you think you'd be satisfied with, which you can always reposition later. With your lights fully tight in the bumper shell, we're going to move on to mounting the brackets to the vehicle. I've went ahead and supported the bed with a 2x4 under our jack. You'll use a 13mm socket to remove the 2 nuts and washers that allow the bed to pivot on the frame. With these removed, we'll replace them with our brackets, and we'll move on to mounting the bumper body to the brackets. With the lock nuts removed that fasten your plastic pivoting bracket to the frame of the bed, you'll go ahead and jack the bed up, which will release the tension on the brackets. As you can see here, the studs that come through the bed into our plastic pivoting bracket, we're going to reuse for our brackets for the Thumper Fab bumper. You'll want to jack it up high enough where you can slide this plastic piece off the frame, and we'll replace it with our bumper brackets. When you remove your plastic pivot bracket, you'll also want to remove the O-ring that's on the shaft behind your plastic bracket. On the passenger side, we have our tail light harness clipped in to our plastic pivoting bracket. I'll take a screwdriver or similar tool to disconnect the wiring harness from our plastic pivot bracket. And I'll simply repeat the process of sliding it and the O-ring off our frame mount, which will all be replaced with our Thumper Fab brackets. So here we have your bumper bracket that'll mount the bumper body to the frame of the vehicle. We'll have them marked with either a D or a P to designate which side of the vehicle they go on. We'll simply slide it over the frame tube, aligning it with the studs in our bed frame. Once we get both in place, we'll lower the bed back down. This will allow the studs to go through the bracket. We'll get everything lined up and tighten it up before mounting the bumper body. We'll repeat the process for the other side. You'll simply slide your bracket over the mount tube, get your studs lined up with the holes. Now we'll go ahead and lower this bed down onto our bumper brackets, which will allow the OEM studs to go through our bracket, and we can start getting everything lined up. When you're setting your bed down, you want to watch and make sure that the studs are sliding through your brackets. You don't want to get it in a bind. It should just gently sit down onto your brackets. Once you have them all the way through, you can cap them back off with the OEM lock nuts before we move on to the next step. When you're reinstalling the OEM lock nuts, you want to make sure not to fully tighten them yet. You'll simply just want to snug the bed down a little bit onto the brackets, then we'll move on to the next step. With your bumper brackets snugged up, you can go ahead and move your jack and whatever you use to support the bed. We'll get ready to mount the bumper body to our bumper brackets. With your brackets mounted to the vehicle, you can go ahead and set your bumper body up on the brackets and begin the process of fastening the body to the brackets. It'll be easiest if you start the 2 bolts that come from the winch box into the brackets horizontally. Once you have those 2 started, you can return and do the remaining 8 fasteners. Once we get this all snugged up, we'll move on to finishing the mounting of the bumper brackets. With your 2 side bolts started, you're going to go ahead and start the remaining 8. As we have stainless hardware, it may be a good idea to put some anti-seize on the threads, especially if you plan on tightening it up with an impact. You'll use our button head screws, a flat washer, and your flange nylon lock nut on the inside of the bumper brackets. With all 10 of your mounting bolts started, you can go ahead and snug them all up evenly. Once you have all these tight, we can move on to finishing the bracket installation. Just a reminder, before you start the installation process, you'll want to go ahead and disconnect and unmount your camera as we relocate your backup camera so that you still have a good view of what's behind you with our Thumper Fab bumper installed. So before we fully tighten our bumper brackets up, we're going to want to go ahead and relocate your backup camera to our center insert panel. You'll simply slide it in the slot provided in the top of the panel. We'll mount it using our number 8 socket cap screws. We'll cap them off with a lock nut on the underside. Once we get that all tight, I'll show you guys how we mount this in between our bumper brackets. We'll get that all tightened up. We can finally tighten our bumper brackets up. With your camera securely mounted to your center panel, you'll simply fish the center panel in between your bumper brackets. Once you get it in place, we'll go ahead and tighten it up with some 1/4 inch button head screws. You may need to play with the heat shielding and kind of finagle it into position. Once you get it sitting in the right spot, we'll go ahead and get it tightened up. Once you have your center panel in position, we'll go ahead and mount it to both our driver and passenger side mount brackets using our 1/4 inch button heads. Once you get that all tightened up, we can return and fully tighten the 2 OEM lock nuts that are holding our brackets in position before we drill the holes for the remainder of the bracket mounting hardware. Once you have your center panel fully installed, I went ahead and zip tied the wires up for the camera. I'm going to tighten up the OEM lock nuts completely that'll fasten the brackets to the bed frame. After that, I'm going to drill holes for the 2 remaining fasteners that'll be used on each bracket to hold them in place. Before you drill the holes through your bed frame and through your bed, you want to make sure that the bumper brackets are exactly where they need to be. We've done that by tightening up the bumper shell to the bumper brackets and also tightening the 2 fasteners that we use to hold the brackets to the frame initially. Once we have everything tight, we can go ahead and drill our pilot holes through the bed frame and through the bed from the underside to mark our location. And we'll step the holes up from the top side and get everything tightened up. So here I have a drill bit extension, and we're going to start our pilot hole with a 1/4 inch drill bit. I'll simply come through the holes provided on the underside of the bracket. You want to make sure that the drill is as plumb as possible before you drill the hole. We'll drill holes in this hole as well as this one. Once you have it all the way through the bed, we'll lower the vehicle down and step up the hole size to accept our fastener. You'll go ahead and repeat the process for the other 3 holes that'll fasten our brackets to the bed. Then we'll go ahead and lower it down, step our hole size up, and get our brackets fully tightened. With our pilot holes pre-drilled from the underside of the vehicle, I'm going to go ahead and step them up from the bed side. I went to a 5/16 drill bit to match our fastener. You'll simply locate the holes that we drilled through the underside of the frame and through the bed. We'll step them up. We'll want to make sure and go all the way through the square tubing so we can install our fasteners. Once we do that, we'll go ahead and tighten everything up with our 5/16 hardware, and we can move on to wiring. Now that we've installed our 5/16 bolts and flat washers, we can go to the underside of the vehicle and cap it off with another flat washer and our lock nuts. We'll go ahead and get this all tightened up, and then we can move on to wiring. For the next step in the installation process, we're going to install our driver and passenger side close-off panels. You'll fasten the close-off panel to the underside of the bed rail using the provided rib nut, and you'll use a self-tapping screw on the outside hole to fasten it to the bed rail. We'll go ahead and install our passenger side cover panel. Just as a reminder, you'll use the rib nut provided on the underside of your bed frame and an OEM bolt to fasten the inside hole. On the outside hole, you'll use a self-tapping screw provided in your hardware kit. With all our cover panels tightened up, you can go ahead and install your retention cable. This retention cable will keep the bumper from hitting the hitch assembly, as well as if you're running larger tires, it'll keep the bottom of the wing of the bumper out of the tires. You'll simply fasten it to the upper and lower strut mount over the clevis pin that mounts the bed strut assembly that dumps the bed when the latch is released. On both ends of the strut, you'll remove the cotter pin in the clevis that mounts the strut to either the bed or the frame assembly, sliding the retention cable in place before reinstalling the clevis pin. This will limit the amount of articulation that the strut can have when the bed is open, which will help keep the bumper off your tires if you're running larger tire. So here we have our harness laid out for our rear bumper lights. You can see our two male connectors, our Deutsch connectors, are what will actually plug into the light. We have our red and black terminal. You can see the fusible link on the red lead. These will connect to our bus bar that'll be up onto the dash. Our relay, which will tuck up and mount with a self-tapping screw somewhere that we find is suitable. And here you can see the switch that will locate inside our dash. We'll disconnect the leads from the switch, route the wires through our desired switch hole, reconnect everything, finally test out the lights. To gain access to our bus bar that's located under the center of our top dash panel, we're going to have to remove the plastic portions of our A-pillar, as well as disconnect the strut assemblies that attach the windshield to the frame that operate the windshield when it's opened up. Once we have this all disconnected, we can remove the Torx fasteners that are on top of our upper dash panel. Once we have that loose, we can flip it up and we'll have access to our bus bar. With our windshield struts disconnected, we can go ahead and move forward with removing the T30 Torx fasteners at the top of our plastic A-pillars, followed by removing the push pins that hold the remainder of our plastic panel on before we move on to the top of the dash. With the main portion of your A-pillar plastic panel out of the way, you'll go ahead and remove this portion on the lower section. You'll simply pop it out of place. As you can see here on the back, there are some clips that hold it in place to the main portion of your dash. Once we get that out of the way, we can repeat the process on the passenger side before loosening up our T30 Torx screws that hold the whole top panel to the dash. With your A-pillar plastics removed from both the driver and the passenger side, you'll take your T30 Torx and remove the perimeter screws. You'll have 6 perimeter screws that'll be T30. Once you have all 6 of those removed, you can pop the dash up and it'll flip up and give you access to the bus bar located underneath this panel. With all 6 of our T30 perimeter screws removed, you can simply pop the upper dash panel up, and this will give us access to our bus bar that's located directly under this center section. Here you can see our red and our black terminal that make up our bus bar. We'll connect the red lead from our harness to the red terminal and the black lead from our harness to the black terminal. You'll use an M6 flanged nylon lock nut to connect the leads to our bus bar. These will have key on power, so whenever you have the key on and the switch on, our rear lights in our bumper will be turned on. As you can see here, I've went ahead and removed our OEM switch panel that we're going to use to mount our switch that'll power our rear bumper lights. You simply pop it out of place. I've already removed one of the covers that'll allow us to easily mount our switch directly in the dash with a nice finished OEM look. So we've went ahead and removed the floorboards from the front and rear section of the cab to allow us to be able to route our harness along this main wiring loom that runs from the front to the back of the vehicle. We're going to zip tie along the way to this wire loom, not to these coolant pipes, to keep it out of the way of anything hot or any rotating components. Once we get up to the firewall, we're going to route to the back of our switch cubby using a fish tape, which will allow us to route our switch leads out this cubby and into our switch. As you can see here, this piece on the passenger side floorboard allows us to fish the wires behind up against the firewall in preparation for running them down the length of the vehicle. Removing the 3 screws that fasten this plastic panel down to the floorboard makes the wiring process significantly easier, and we highly recommend it so that you're able to fish the wires easily from up in the dash to down into the transmission tunnel. With all of our wires ran from the front to the back of the vehicle, we're going to go ahead and first connect our switch. As you can see, we've ran the lead through the open cubby we plan on connecting our switch to. Here you can see the leads and the switch. We're going to connect them in order from top to bottom: black, white, and then blue. Once you have your leads reconnected to the switch, you can route your remaining harness into the dash and pop your switch into position. Before we do that though, we want to connect the red and the black lead from our harness to the bus bar located under the center of the dash. We've gone ahead and connected the wires to the corresponding terminals. The only thing left for us to do to test it is we'll plug in the lights with our Deutsch connectors, and then we'll turn the key on, turn the switch. With the key on, we'll have key on power to our switch, and then we'll be able to test if our lights work out. Here you can see the black lead from our harness connected to the black terminal on our bus bar. Similarly, we connected the red lead from our harness to the red terminal on the bus bar. Tighten these down with a 10mm socket using the M6 nuts provided in your hardware kit. Here you can see our wiring harness that we ran through the transmission tunnel and over the battery. On the back left side of the battery compartment, there's an opening provided in the firewall to the engine bay. We're able to fish our harness through this and up the passenger side frame rail, where we connect the harness to the Deutsch connectors provided on our slim lights. Here you can see where we routed our harness for the lights. We zip tied it to an OEM harness where we ultimately plug in the Deutsch connector to the female end of the Deutsch connector provided on the light bar. We'll go ahead and get this all tied up and tidied up. But now we're ready to test the lights. With your lights tested out and your wiring all tidied up, you're ready to hit the trails and enjoy your new Thumper Fab bumper for your HD11 Defender.